Hello, welcome to this brief overview of the ELAT, which is the English Language Admissions Test. We have Lucinda, who's going to be talking through the tutor perspective on the admissions test, and I'm Sarah, the Apps Officer at Mansfield. But yeah, over to you, Lucinda.
Okay, hello. So I teach English and I've also been involved in setting the test quite a bit, and when it was first set up, which is now a long time ago. So I suppose, what we'll need to talk about a bit is kind of like what it is and how you do it. So I'll start on some of those things. So what it is, it's a set of 6 pieces of writing, and they're all on a theme. And each year we pick a theme, and then we go around looking for passages which are as much as possible things that you won't have read before, which sounds a bit mean, but the idea is that you shouldn't look at the passage and think, oh, I've studied that for A-level, or I've looked at that before, or what do I remember? You're trying to think, look at it and kind of work on it just as real fresh eyes. So we give you a theme because what we want you to do is use the 2 passages. You're asked to pick 2, and use 2 passages to think about how the two deal differently or similarly with the same theme. And we give you quite a precise instruction, the sort of rubric at the beginning, which is begin your little essay by saying, this is how I'm going to compare them. And so that gives you a sort of starting point and enables you to do a little bit of, on the one hand this and on the other hand that. So that's what it is. And you can go and look at old versions on the ELAT site.
Could you maybe talk a bit about where it falls in the application process as well? So like both in terms of the timeline and also how it's used.
Yeah, absolutely. So we would get when you apply, you sign up to do the ELAT test, and the way we get the information is that we get your UCAS form from your application, and we know, we've found out quite a lot about you from that, and what you're studying and what you're reading, and from your personal statement and stuff. And then you do the ELAT, and we get that information next. So what we get is just a mark for your ELAT. Or actually a kind of, we can sometimes see the 2 marks, but because it's marked twice or 3 times, we don't mark it. We also get sent the paper, what you actually did, and we would never ask you about that in your interview, but sometimes it's really helpful for us to read that and to sort of see how you write, but we don't mark it and give that a separate mark. And then that goes into all the bits of information that we have of you, which all go together to help us with the decision of whether we interview you or not. So the UCAS form, the bit of written work that you send us, you'll send us sort of something that you've written as part of your school or college work. And the ELAT is the kind of the extra thing that we get. And on top of that, we obviously then give you your interview.
So yeah, I think it's really important for you to remember that they do have to register separately for the admissions test. Usually your school or college can help you do that, but just make sure you register. And kind of off what you were just saying, Lucinda, what does the ELAT tell you in terms of all the information that you get about a candidate? What's the point of it, essentially?
Yeah, why that? Yeah, I think it's because it's when we get people's written work that they've done as part of school and college, it's really difficult to see kind of how the candidate is thinking, and more about how they write, because obviously A-levels really kind of works towards following, or any exam works towards following sort of scheme and obeying particular kind of criteria and categories. And so the ELAT is sort of allowing you to sort of write a bit more freely and to choose your way of approaching it. And so we can see a little bit more about how you write. It's also good to put people who are doing all sorts of different qualifications, all doing exactly the same thing, for which nobody has had, they've not been following a course to do this or whatever. So it's to give us a different way of looking at how you write, separate from the other ways that we find out about your writing and how you might read a piece of writing. So it's a slightly distinct thing to do something unseen, and for it to be quite short. You only write for an hour, so it's a very separate, discrete task, which gives us a little bit more information on you.
Yeah, and for everybody who's who's applying to have sat the same test and likely writing on a similar theme as well.
Yeah.
And so, how would you recommend people approach the first of all, picking the text, the unseen material, and then getting started on answering it?
Yeah, so one of the things when the test is set is that we try to choose different kind of forms of writing. So we include some poetry, some prose. We might include some non-fiction and fiction, things from different periods of literature. So there's a kind of real range. And so one of the things about picking is to think, what am I good at doing? Do I really like writing about poetry, or do I really not like writing about poetry, for instance? One thing I kind of advise you to do, which is a bit destructive, is that when you get the paper, rip it up so that you have so that you can lay the two sheets next to each other, your piece of poetry and your piece of prose, whatever, and look at them together, because obviously they're a sort of sheet where they're back and front. And if necessary, ask for an extra paper so you can rip it up and have everything laid out. So my advice is read them all through, and they sort of suggest that you spend half an hour preparing and then an hour writing. So read them all through, and the things you could dismiss are when you read something and you think, okay, I really would not want to write about drama. I would hate doing that. So if you want to, you can just leave one out and decide to avoid that because you feel you couldn't write on that. But make sure you read your options, your 5 or 6 options, really carefully. Think not just what do you like, but think about how they kind of might talk to each other as passages. I mean, my next kind of advice is sort of like for approach is write all over it. And so you get as many notes and things out of it as you can, write everything you can think of, because I think what happens when you start writing, when you actually start composing and writing the essay, is that you've got an idea in your head, and usually it's kind of like one big idea and you've written it, and then you think, oh, what do I do next? And there's nothing left. I'm sure people will have that when they're writing essays in school and college, that you kind of think, oh, I've got this brilliant idea, and then once you've said that, you're not quite sure how to say anything else. So the other thing I do is I've got 2 sort of key pieces of advice, I think. One is make a plot of the thing that you have read. So if it's a poem, it might not seem to have a story, but it will have a development. So, even if you just write down, the person writes about being sad, they use an image kind of which expresses them being sad, and then they talk about what somebody said to them, even if you just write something as simple as that. So you have a sense of, it starts here, it goes to here, and then it stops. And make that your plot, and then try finding, I think of it like doing a bit of detective work. It's like a body. It's got lots of, it's been stabbed and shot and strangled and garroted. So you need to kind of think how you approach it with all those different things. So, kind of what are the images like? What's the sentence structure like? If it's a poem, does it rhyme? What's the length of the lines? What kind of language is it? So set yourself almost doesn't matter what they are, but set yourself 6 different things, which might include punctuation, not just things to do with what it means, but things to do with the way that it does it, the form of it. And then try and find out evidence from each of those, like a literary policeman.
And so when you're doing that, you could find yourself in a number of situations. The first one being, oh my God, I have nothing to write about. I don't have enough things to fill this essay. Or the other kind of extreme is, wow, look at all these things I found. Do I just try and shove them all in? And kind of how would you recommend people approach if they found themselves in that difficult situation?
Yeah, I think the structuring can be quite difficult. And I think because it's only an hour, if you were writing usually, you might just feel like you could rewrite and start again. You're not going to have time for that. So I think when you're doing a test like this, you can be a bit more obvious than you would be if you were doing something in an A-level essay or a school and college essay. So you could write your notes in a really kind of very obviously paragraphing way. So I'm going to, and remember you've got these two passages you're doing this with. So you could think, okay, in my first paragraph, I'm going to roughly talk about what is happening in each of these texts. So this is a text which is about storms. So there was one that was set about storms. These two texts are about storms. In this one, the storm is interior and it's about how a person feels. In this one, it's about somebody being on a boat where there's a storm. So you could begin by doing that and saying, and that's interesting because, there's a metaphor in one and there's so then you can set up how they're different and how they're the same in looking at the theme. And then you can say, one is verse and one is prose. And what's interesting about the way in which the structure of the text works is that this does this and this does this. And so work your way down and make yourself maybe 5 paragraphs, one on plot, and then one on the way images are used in each, and compare them. And if in doubt, try and find a really specific example from each one for each thing. So almost you've got like 10 examples you're going to use, 5 paragraphs. And obviously you don't have to sort of keep to that rigidly, but if you think I've got that as my skeleton, I keep thinking of this body lying on the ground with lots of, kind of that's been merged in lots of ways. If you've got that skeleton and you've got all those different kind of thoughts, you can make a structure and then you can loosen up and write more and differently. But that's a start. That gets you over the edge, I think.
Yeah, and I think often with these things, you do just have to get started on the planning and the thinking, and not panic too much, because the more you start thinking, the more things will fall into place.
Yeah.
And I guess kind of finally, what advice or how can people prepare if they're thinking about applying and then wanting to be prepared for the ELAT?
Sure. And I think, we do recognise that people will have different opportunities in school and college to do this and to practice. And the people who market are really aware that they're kind of looking at people with different levels of preparation. So you shouldn't worry that you're not doing something that somebody else is doing. So I reckon it's worth practicing doing about 3. When you look on the website for the ELAT, because of copyright, not all the text will be up there. And so something you could do yourself is you could find 2 passages from 2 books you love about a topic, just a theme, and try and compare them with each other. So that would be one thing you could do. Or you could use the ELAT paper, and the ELAT papers will have the really old passages which are out of copyright. So you do the most difficult ones, the ones that are kind of in older English and that kind of thing. So that's worth doing. So preparing, I think you could sit down with a friend and what can I get out of this text? Not bother about the structure initially, but just trying everything you could wring out of it. So you could try that. The other thing is you could get yours, kind of look up online and find out, kind of different sorts of ways in which poetry works. So look on some poetry websites where poets talk about how they write and think about, sort of the tactics that poets use or the tactics that prose writers use, and do that. Reading widely will just make you more kind of receptive to different kinds of writing. And then I think that the last thing is you just have to think, if you love reading and you want to do English, then this should be actually quite a fun thing to do. And so read it and think, not just, kind of what am I trying to say? You don't need to worry about thinking really, really serious thoughts about, how clever you're being, but think, okay, I'm a reader. I'm going to be a professional reader. What in this is strange? What in this raises questions? What in this is funny? Try and find one thing funny, even in the most tragic thing, and try to sort of why is it funny? Why does it do that to me? And that's a really good way of sort of practicing your reactions. And if you want to practice for timing and stuff, try doing one in 20 minutes and then try doing one in half an hour and then 40 minutes and then an hour. Because if you don't practice short timing, you'll run out of time, because everybody always does. And they're quite short. They're only a couple of pages. Lots of people only write a couple of pages. So don't worry too much about length. It's fun. And we read some really good ones, but also just one little bit of what we do. And the thing the thing that kind of makes a good one for me is to kind of have some sense that somebody's actually quite enjoying reading the text and kind of finding them engaging. And so I think it's fine to say, and what is really odd here is, to sort of to engage quite personally with it, because it's good to hear your voice.